you can be your own worst enemy. And I think visualizing your success is probably is very powerful. And I wish I had done that more when I was younger.
You are now listening to the Going North podcast with your host, author and speaker, Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, you're going to hear the voice of a different author share their stories, expertise, and their struggles that they had to overcome in life to leave you inspired to get more out of your life. Be sure to not only listen to this episode, but share with others, connect with the authors, and always advance others to advance yourself. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today is no different because we got another interesting human on the show, baby. Another interesting human. This is actually going to be a first for the show because we have a former international model in addition to her fabulous work as an author. Because this fabulous person right here was born and educated in the U.S., but then she began a career as an international fashion model at the age of 18 when she was scouted by a top international modeling agency in Milan, Italy. After moving to Italy, she navigated the international fashion world, modeling for top agents, famous fashion designers and photographers, traversing the globe and working in fashion capitals such as Paris, Tokyo, Milan, and New York. And after marrying and starting a family, she retired as a fashion model and continued life as an expatriate in the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Singapore, and Italy, where she divided her free time between volunteering for international organizations and teaching English. And recently, she decided to put pen to paper and make fictional use of her plethora of experiences she gained during her globe-trotting life. So this fabulous lady right here is living with her husband, currently splitting the time between Europe and the US of A. So let's give it up for the one, the only fabulous and elegant EJ Moran. So is there anything I may have missed and fill us in on who is the wonderful EJ?
No, I pretty much you covered a lot of it. I mean, I've had a pretty diverse international life, but you touched on a lot of it. So thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Ah, sweet. All right, all right. Well, that's what I'm talking about indeed. So international fashion model. International
Mm,
fashion model.
mm.
That's right. All the shoes, all the dresses, all the purses, right?
Yeah, back in the day, yes, yes. Well, not always shoes, and it's funny because people have asked me many times, well, when you were modeling, did you get to keep the clothes? It seems to be a common misconception, but usually you do not get to keep the clothes, or at least in my day, you didn't. On occasion, rather than being paid with money, the designer would ask, would you do my show? And then you can have a really nice outfit or something like that. But that's a misconception.
Ah, okay. Alrighty. So they
For
were.
what it's worth. For what it's But no, it's amazing. A lot of people have asked, well, do you get to keep the clothes? And the answer is always no. But you do, or you did in my day, get to, if you did a big show for a famous designer, usually that designer would have a sample sale and you'd be one of, so you a $2,000 dress for $15, something like that. Probably a little worn, a little, but yes. So
Ah, so they were cheap. I got you. Let me stop.
well, cheap and used and cheap and tattered.
It's like, yep. All right. Looking great. All right, cool. We're going to need that dress back. Thank you. All right, cool. Appreciate your service. All right. On to the next show, right?
Right.
Well, it's not every day that someone gets to be a model, let alone an international model. So, how was that? How was the discovery process?
A famous modeling agency from Italy came to Chicago, my hometown, and they were scouting for models. And it was an interesting day because the sun was shining, it was beautiful out. And so, consequently, my hair looked good. I just want to add that. My hair looked good that day, the best it could look. So I went to the interview, and obviously I thought I was looking good, even if I wasn't, but I thought I was looking good. And I was chosen along with two other models. With this agent probably interviewed 200 or so, 200 plus models. And I was one of the chosen ones to go work in Milan, Italy. And I had wonderful parents who never pursuing my dream, and that was one of my dreams. And so it all started there. But I had just turned 18. I mean, I was naive. I was, you know, a babe in the woods.
Almost like Little Red Riding Hood, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, think back when you were 18. I don't know, maybe you were street smart, but I was a ding dong, honestly. But I'll never forget. I remember it's pretty internationally known now that Europeans kiss you on each cheek, right? That's sort of customary. Although at this very moment with coronavirus, nobody's kissing anybody. But and it's kind of known that when you say hello to somebody of the same sex, the opposite sex, a friend, a relative, you kiss each other on the cheek. Well, when I arrived in Milan, Italy, I didn't know that at all. And my agent, who picked me up from the airport, I think, kissed me on each cheek. And I thought, oh my God, oh my God, what's happening here? What did I do? What did I do? I thought he was making a pass at me. Well, he wasn't. He was just saying hello. But I didn't know. I was just naive, right? But it all worked out.
Ah, fabulous indeed. Yeah, because that's like the interesting thing when you get to travel across countries and nations. You get to learn different customs and greetings and things like that. And
Hmm.
especially with that one, it's like, okay, especially me as a guy, if I didn't know, I would have punched somebody. Like, no, don't do
Yeah, could
that.
you imagine? I mean, my husband, when I met my husband and introduced him to my father, I think, if I recall, my husband went to kiss my father on each cheek. My father was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing? What are you doing? It doesn't happen in America. It's a foreign concept. Like I said, more known now, but when I was 18 and when this happened, I thought, oh my gosh, did he make a pass at me? What does that mean? He kissed me. He was just saying hello. Their custom. Funny.
Oh, yes, indeed. So how long did it take you to get used to all the customs? I mean, it probably didn't take as long as if you're in a place like maybe China or Japan with a different whole entire language. But how long did it take you to get used to that?
Well, it was my first time abroad. So it did take me a while. I was sort of in shell shock. Just the custom of eating late. I come from the Midwest. I grew up eating dinner at 6 p.m. Okay, dinner time. You're home, you eat dinner. And in Italy, 9 o'clock, typical 8:30, 9 o'clock. So that took a while to get used to because I was starving. So it took me a while. It took me a while, but I love different cultures, embrace different cultures, and perhaps that experience was one of the hardest experiences. But when I moved to Japan, no, immediately, I was used to living around the world a bit, so I loved it.
Sweet, sweet. And the beautiful thing is that you're able to take part of some of your traveling and modeling experience and put into your fabulous book, Shadow Crimes.
Hmm.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I read a bit of the book in the beginning. I was a little thrown. I was like, "Oh shit, for real!" And then I realized, wait a second, I'm not usually a mystery reader. So, what led you to decide to put pen to paper and write a fiction novel based off your experience?
Well, I did always want to write. After working as a fashion model and raising my family, I always thought about, I need to be a writer. But I had a story to tell. I had a story to tell, and it just happened to coincide with the Me Too movement. My story, I wanted it to be fiction, but a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about actually happened in that world. And I think it was a step more complicated than the simple Me Too movement, in the fact that you're dealing with being overseas. So the support that you would have in your own country, you don't have. There's a language barrier. There are lots of issues. So I wanted to write a book both about the great things I experienced, which I did, and I go to Studio 54, which I talk about in my book, and I had a ball at Studio 54. Wow, I'm so happy to have had that experience. But I also go into some of the reality. And as I was writing, I had this imagination. My imagination just goes on forever. As I was writing, the book just took on its own life, and the story became bigger and more intense. And I loved the process. But a lot of the story is based on truth, even though I never did know a serial murderer, as far as I know. Yeah, and I think I really wanted to point out motivation in telling this story, and that motivation was, there aren't just bad people in the world, in that industry. There are a lot of enablers as well, and a lot of people around the bad person who lets the bad person get away with what he gets away with, he or she, because it could be a she. And I really wanted to point that out because it's the truth, because there are more people to blame than just one. And the book is fiction. I just want to make this clear. I never knew a modeling agency in Italy was owned by this terrible person that I made up. Some of it's based on truth. Some of the stories come things that either happened to me or happened to somebody I knew. So that's my answer.
Ah, fabulous indeed. Fabulous indeed. Will there be a part two?
There's already a part two. Yes, there's a part two because the story didn't end entirely. So there's more to tell. Going back to what I was saying, if I may, with this Me Too movement, it still hasn't been discussed how living abroad, you can be really vulnerable. Living in different parts of the world.
Yeah, it's true because you mentioned that you're basically raised in the Midwest and used to eating dinners at 6 p.m. as opposed to other countries where you eat later, and then you're basically not sure of all of the customs. And some folks may try to use that to their advantage to take advantage. And, and you're so right. Especially overseas, you're even more vulnerable, especially since your family's thousands of miles away if you still have your family in a way. So you're definitely right about that.
Yeah, so that was the motivation behind the book, but I so loved the process. I came up with a million ideas for more books. But the next book actually takes place between New York and Japan, where I lived for 5 years, a country I adore, and a story that sort of involves the Yakuza. I don't know if you know what the Yakuza is.
Oh, yeah.
Um, do you?
Oh, yes, indeed. The Japanese mafia, right?
Right, the guys with no fingers. Right? So, yes. So the story continues on.
Woohoo! Fabulous. And it's great that you also put it in audiobook form for the lazy folks who don't feel like reading.
It's really interesting. I was selling my book too long ago, and this woman came up, and she was with her husband or her partner who was blind. And this author standing me, she said, "Tell him about your audiobook." And I wasn't focused on that. And so then I did tell him, I said, "By the way, I do have an audiobook if you'd like it." So they both bought the audiobook and the paperback so they could read it together. And I mean, he could listen to it and she could read it. And I thought that was wonderful. So it is out there in audio version. I'm trying to tap into I heard this interesting thing while overseas here on television, on I think it was CNBC, about the female truck drivers in America. There are 250,000 plus female truck drivers. Who knew? I didn't know that. Anyway, they listen to audiobooks. So my next marketing plan is to sort of reach out to them because they would be a great audience.
Oh yeah, it's true, especially nowadays with all the deliveries they have to double time with, and not to mention period. Heck, even myself included, audiobooks. I'm always listening to audiobooks when I drive from place to place. So definitely want to take the learning on the go, but in this case, the adventure on the go.
Right. In this case, the adventure on the go, the adventure on the go. But also podcasts, that's relatively new to me. And I love your podcast show. It's fantastic. And it's a whole new world being opened up to me. And I'm really, really excited about it because, you know, I'm the kind of person, I don't know about you, but I have to do two things at once. I rarely only do one thing. And what I mean by that, if I'm doing physical task, I have to sideline it with a mental task. So podcasts are great for that. So you can, I cook a lot. I'm married to an Italian. Come on, we have to cook. When I'm chopping my vegetables, I can listen to a podcast and learn something. I think it's wonderful.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about. Keeping it mobile, indeed. Keeping it mobile, indeed. I'm glad it was something like that as opposed to like, all right, so I'm in the middle of this interview and I'm making this random coding program that's going to make modeling twice as fun. Let me stop.
Well, oh, right. Okay.
Yes, indeed. So, what helps you to get your first book out? Any tips for the folks who are working on their first novel that may have helped you to write your novel?
Well, discipline. You have to do it every day. I really changed my lifestyle. I got up earlier. I was very disciplined. I made myself write even if I didn't want to write. So that's the first thing. And then one step at a time, right? Just keep moving forward. And lo and behold, I finished it, which amazed me. And but discipline, I think discipline is a very, very big component.
Yep, that's true. And it seems to be the common thread amongst those who write and actually publish because you have to really dedicate yourself to a finished product, especially a novel, because that's a whole different ball game than a nonfiction product. Because a fiction, you have to make sure the story makes sense and has to keep going, as opposed to nonfiction, just basically a bunch of blog articles you can package together and edit and polish up.
Well, that's the other thing. But I decided early on that even though I had been teaching English, and I tell you, I had been teaching English to learn my own language again because I'd lived overseas for so long, and I'm married to an Italian man who his first language is Italian. I couldn't even speak my own language anymore. It was ridiculous. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to teach for a while so I can relearn my own language. Well, then I thought I became an expert. Here I am, I'm teaching everybody, so I can write a book. Well, I learned early on that you need an editor. And I've happened to find fortuitously an excellent editor, and she really helped me pull my book together. And, I'm not the type of person who is ever afraid to ask for help. So I was sharing my story with I have journalist friends, I have friends who have written books before, and I talked to them about it, and I got a lot of input from them as well. And so I don't believe you ever do things alone. I think you really do need to acknowledge that you need help and get help to reach your goal.
That's right. Teamwork makes the dream work, indeed. Yes, indeed.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed. And that's so powerful right there. And that's something that I never even thought of. And it's so true, the fact that teaching English is a way to really relearn your own language because you probably learned what, maybe two or three different languages during your travels.
Oh my Yeah, I learned a few languages. I speak Italian, I speak some Japanese. I also lived in England for 14 years, and British English is very different from American English. So I was just all confused. I couldn't remember things like when to use the ing verb, when not to use the ing verb. I just became very confused. And like I said, my husband is Italian and he's very good at speaking English, but he was making mistakes. And I think everybody should do that. I think that's one thing, it's my pet peeve, I have to say, my pet peeve. I listen to a lot of international news here. And my pet peeve is listening to grammar mistakes, of which there are so many.
Oh yeah.
There are so many, and that includes me. That includes me, because when you speak, it's very easy to make mistakes. That includes me. So I think it would be great for everybody later in life to just relearn their own language.
Oh yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, especially depending on what part of the world you were from and what what language you learn, because there's there's this whole thing where Baltimoreans have their own accent, and all these other cities and states have their own accents. And funny enough, I've been in Baltimore my whole life, and folks ask me where I'm from because I say Baltimore with the actual T, when folks from Baltimore say Baltimore without the actual T. So you're definitely right about
Oh, do they really? I never knew that.
Yep.
Baltimore. They say Baltimore. They don't say Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. They're like, yep, if you add the T, you are not from here, sir or ma'am. You're not from here. Like, all right, keep believing that.
Well, that's so funny you should say that, because people in Europe, a lot of times, they ask where I'm from. I say, I'm Chicago, Illinois. They say Illinois. I say, no, it's not Illinois. It's Illinois. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's fun. I love language. I do love language. I'm really into the language thing, and I enjoyed being a teacher, I have to say. Surprisingly, because I was used to on the runway and in front of cameras, and honestly, I thought it was hot stuff. I'll admit it. So then, when I became and that was short lived. I didn't think I was hot stuff for very long. Believe me, I came down to earth pretty quickly. But but when I became an English teacher, I thought, an English teacher? I mean, come on, I'm an ex-fashion model here. I loved it. I loved teaching. I was teaching adults, and I taught so many interesting people. I even taught Osama bin Laden's niece, believe it or not.
oh wow.
Yeah, that was a very cool experience. That was in London. I was teaching, and this lovely woman, beautiful girl, about 19, wearing a headscarf and whatnot. We were having a conversation, and she said, I always want to go to America to go to university. And I said, well, why don't you go? I knew her last name was Bin Laden, but I was under the impression that there were thousands of Bin Ladens and that she probably wasn't related to Osama. And so I said to her, well, you should go. You should go. Definitely go to Boston, go to university. She said, oh, I try, but they don't let me in. And I said, come on, you can't really be, you're not related to bin Laden, are you? I said, because maybe that's why. And she said, oh, yeah, he's my uncle. And I thought, you know what? I think that's why you can't get to an American university. But I just met so many interesting, wonderful people. I love people. I love cultures. I loved different cultures from the day I was born. So it was fun experience.
So, did anyone leave a apple on your desk that was full of glitter?
No. No, but I did get a gift. This is another funny story. So I was teaching an Iranian man. I taught adults in England. You get people from all over the world in England, English schools. And these adults were from every country on this earth. And I had one, and I taught in groups of like 20 often. I didn't teach one-on-one that much. I taught in groups, which I preferred as well. And one of my students was from Moran. And at the end of the course, he gave me a gift. And the gift was a bag of peanuts in a paper bag. And I thought, okay, an odd gift. I mean, I was flattered. It was sweet of him to give me a gift, but it was very strange, very strange. So I did get funny gifts from different students, from Chinese students, from Japanese students. It's very sweet. I enjoyed it. I really relished those few years that I taught English, very few years, but it was fun.
Sweet. Fun on the bun. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Huh. So that's all there wasn't like a hidden love note under the bag of peanuts?
I was wondering, I was thinking, what does this mean? There must be a meaning here. No, there wasn't. And you know what? A friend pointed out to me, really saw the positive side because I kind of thought, this is really odd. And this friend told me, well, maybe that's all he could afford. And I thought, yeah, probably, maybe that was all he could afford. And then I think I heard that peanuts were sort of an esteemed food item in Iran, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, it was very interesting. I just taught wonderful cultures, people from Mongolia, people from all over the world. But like I said, that's me. I started traveling when I was 18 and never really moved back to the United States for any length of time. So that is me.
That's what I'm talking about. Even though this might not be a popular question at the moment with all the nonsense going on, since you travel a lot, is there any advice you give for folks on how to pack for short trips and long trips?
Sure. Talk about packing. Oh my gosh, my Achilles heel. Well, Achilles heel. I would bring everything and the kitchen sink on every trip I went to. No, and I've traveled so much, but I have narrowed it down. And I would say, when you travel, pick three colors. Okay, only three colors: black, white, and pink, or something. Because if you start putting in all your colors, then you have to match the shoes. This is from a female perspective. Then you have to match your shoes and match your handbag and your scarf. Forget it. Just three colors. I would say that. And choose everything lightweight. And I also love clear plastic bags, like Ziploc bags, or here where I live now, they have these wonderful clear plastic bags, and I use those to put my shoes in because I'm not the kind of person who just wants my dirty shoes laying on my clothes. They have to be, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I put them in clear plastic bags always. I use lots of little travel size plastic containers that I get. My medication pills can be a plastic container for shampoo. I use that. But my biggest tip is three colors, and buy lightweight luggage. Don't get heavy luggage. My favorite, I have Samsonite luggage, best luggage in the world. I paid a pretty penny, but you can lift it with your baby finger.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Baby finger goodness. So, is that one of the keys to sustaining your youth is light luggage?
Not really, because I'll tell you, for the last 3 years, I've been living out of a suitcase and my hand is completely bad shape. So it's probably from all of my moving. But so that's not the key to youth. But that is key to seamlessly traveling. I would say light luggage, three colors, and pack for and layers. Another thing, for example, traveling to London, you have to have layers. In the morning, it can be sunny. And then an hour later, it can start raining. And then the gales can come in. And then it can pour with rain again. And by 5 o'clock, it's sunny again. So you need layers. You need layers and three colors.
Oh, wow. So, it's not just over here in the States, it's also across the pond. Crazy weather.
It's even worse there. British weather, I mean, they're the first ones to tell you. Nightmare.
Yes, indeed. Used to tell folks it's best to wear Speedos and a fur coat. I guess I have to wear even more over there, huh?
Yeah, no fur coats in London, huh? No way, Jose. Bad, bad, bad. I lived in London for 14 years. I had several fur coats. I was verbally assaulted many times for wearing a fur coat. I would never wear, I don't really wear my fur coats much anymore. And I am anti-fur at this point, but I still have them. So what am I supposed to do with them? I would never wear them in London. No, 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 no. You're just looking to be attacked verbally.
So I guess we know where the folks of Peter really love to live. All right.
Yeah.
Fabulous indeed. Fabulous indeed. I guess that's kind of a pun intended considering your profession at one point. But question been asking.
Fabulous, darling. I don't know. Did you read my book? You read my book, right? So the photographers, fabulous, bella, beautiful, gorgeous, right? Of course. That's how it is.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, a question that a lot of folks have been liking lately is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often?
Well, sure. I do wish more people would ask me what it's like to have modeled because and to have lived in so many different countries because I don't get that question often. And I think to the person who lives the normal life, because my life has been pretty unusual, they just kind of clam up and don't ask anything. And so, it would be fun to hear more questions about that. But also, I would like to hear from women and men about ways people can stay safe while traveling internationally or nationally for that matter. Ways they can stay safe and measures they can take.
So, does staying safe traveling for you involve knowing kung fu and all sorts of joint locks and whatnot?
I tell you that had I actually, that reminds me, one time I taught a girl how to model. And in exchange, she couldn't pay me. In exchange, her husband taught me defensive movements, defensive moves, and I'll never forget them. They were useful, but yeah, if I had to do over, I would have I would have started taking some martial arts classes at a young age. Why not? You have nothing to lose.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Nothing to lose and all to gain. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe balance. That's probably about the only thing you get to lose in martial arts during the training period. Depend-
True. Very true. Well, it's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine who happens to be American, but she lives here. She's married to a European man as well. And she's very petite. She's a little girl. And we were talking about this subject. I think I was talking about my book at that time and, why did you write it? And I wrote blah, blah, blah. And she told me that she had been assaulted 2 times badly. And both times she managed to fight the attacker off, and she's a karate expert. So they chose her because she's tiny, but boy, did they run because she really let him have it. So I thought that was great. Great story.
Oh, yeah. Great with 7 R's indeed. Yes, indeed.
Well, I think everybody should learn how to protect themselves. And my book again, even though it's fiction, it is based on a lot of truth. My book is female orientated. Obviously, I'm talking about the modeling world from a woman's point of view. But I've known a lot of men, gay men, who are up against situations sort of the same kind of situation, and straight men. It goes both ways, not just about women. It's about, in the beginning of my book, I talk about how I wrote this book for people that don't have a voice and don't have power, really.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Because everybody's got to learn to defend themselves against nonsense. Yes,
Right,
indeed.
right.
Well, coming down to the question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you were to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in 2020 with all of your amassed knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, wow, that's a heavy question. My advice would be to myself would be to have more confidence. I was in a field that required a lot of confidence. I think I was in a field that required a lot of confidence, so clearly I did have a fair amount of confidence, but I think that you can be your own worst enemy. And I think visualizing your success is very powerful. And I wish I had done that more when I was younger. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense indeed, because when you're in your 20s, there's still some self development going on, some mental development. Now, granted, women mentally mature faster than men, but still, it's still that confidence thing where you have to build it up and keep it up at a high. And it's a lot of self discovery going on. And at 25, it's like you're starting to really get more comfortable in your own skin in a way. So it makes perfect sense to me, anyway.
Yeah, it does. And I think that visualizing really believing in yourself can move mountains.
That's right, especially if the mountains are shaped like a pair of high heels, right?
Right. Oh, I love my heels. Still wear them, of course. I love high heels. They're beautiful. I don't like the platforms, and I'm so glad I wasn't on the runway when platforms were big. Because have you seen all the videos of models falling on the runway, even famous models falling on the runway because they're in these ridiculous shoes? You don't get a choice when you're working for a designer. He says, put these shoes on. He or she says, put these shoes on. And usually, something most people don't know, those shoes are not your size. They get a standard pair of shoes, they're not your size. So a lot of the models on the runway are wearing shoes that are either too small or too big. It's a fact. And unless you're working with a team, the team who's producing the show really knows what they're doing. Unless you're working with them, you can have a lot of disasters on the runway. For example, these shoes, if they've never been worn, they have to either be taped or scratched on the bottom, or you're going to slide all over the place. You're going to kill yourself on the runway. So I'm just very thankful platforms were not popular when I was modeling, because I would have definitely fallen over many times. No doubt about it.
Ah, learned something new today about the modeling world and platforms. My goodness. Yes, indeed. Platforms make you fall off the platform.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a video circulating of Naomi Campbell, wonderful model, gorgeous. I never had the pleasure of working with her because she sort of came in when I was going out of the business. She fell on platforms. She fell. What are you going to do?
Yeah, just got to get back up and recover.
Well, it's all about getting back up and recovering. You just have to laugh at yourself, make a joke of it, make light of it, pretend like it didn't happen. But whatever you do, don't stay on the ground and cry.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Unless they're tears of joy when you got back up.
Well, I think the best thing is if you're a performer, and I think skilled performers know this, you have to laugh at yourself or make light of it. I had, because I'm not on the runway anymore, but I had many calamities on the runway. And I saw many calamities. Oh, such funny things. But you have to make light of it. If you make light of it, the audience makes light of it. If you fall apart, the audience will never forget.
Oh, yeah. It's so true. And they make sure you don't forget either. That's the worst part.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And especially now with the internet. Oh, dear. If you screw up on the runway, I feel sorry for these girls. If you screw up on the runway, it goes viral instantly. It wasn't like that in my day.
It's really good that you didn't have to deal with that back when you're modeling because, yeah, folks like to capture things and then it's on the internet forever. Now, granted,
Yeah,
folks will probably forget about it probably about a good year or so, and when they move on to the next thing, but it's still in your memory though.
and they can always pull it back up, can't they?
That's right. Who needs a file folder? They got smartphones, the zombie apocalypse device.
Yeah, the world is well, the whole fashion, the whole modeling business has changed dramatically too, from what I understand. I remember I was thinking of, I was living in New York and I was going to get back into the business. So I went to a well-known photographer to have some shots taken because I needed to put together a composite. And I was just doing what I had done all my years. I modeled 12 years plus. So I was worried, making sure my makeup was perfect, my hair was perfect, and, my legs looked perfect. And he said, oh, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Photoshop. And I was blown away. You didn't have to worry about a pimple anymore. You didn't have to worry that the shading, the lighting was bad. Really, you didn't have to worry that your hair was a bit messy. I was blown away at how things had changed. And then, I still have some friends in the business and some who have agencies and whatnot. And the big thing now in the modeling world, from what I understand, is all about your followers. You have to have followers on Instagram. Doesn't even matter what you look like. It's your followers.
Yeah, my goodness. Yeah, it's true and it kind of is bad to be honest because I mean, I didn't want to go the IG model route because some of them they just throw themselves out there skin wise and
Oh,
just to
well,
get flowers, just to get
that's
followers.
yeah, you know, I was a fashion model. I want to reiterate that. I hate the way that word is used interchangeably, and especially over in England, it's used interchangeably. Well, there's a big difference. In England, glamour modeling means modeling without clothes. Okay. I was a fashion model through and through. I loved clothes. That was what I was all about.
That's right. That's right indeed. And learn something else too, indeed. That's right. Fashion for the clothes, glamour for no clothes. All right.
Well, yeah, you didn't know that, right? That's
Nope.
British English. See? That's what I love about language. British English, glamour modeling. It means modeling without clothes. Okay. Fashion modeling. I was a fashion model. Big difference.
That's right. Huge difference, an uber difference.
Uber difference. Right, right. But
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, for those who want to keep in magical contact with you and snag some copies of your book, audiobook, or even both, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you, EJ?
the best way would be, I suppose, through my email. I'm also on Facebook and I'm also on Instagram. Of course, my book is being sold on a lot of the online sites. www.ejmoranauthor.com.
Well, there you have it, folks. Go out there, buy some copies of EJ's magical book. Buy all the copies. That's right. Buy like 50 of them, 100 of them.
Oh, I would love that. Oh, bestseller immediately. Yes. Again, it's www.ejmoranauthor.com. And I would love to start some dialogue. If anybody has any questions about the business or about living overseas, the international lifestyle, I would be happy to answer them. Any questions about protecting yourself in the work world or in the fashion world, happy to answer them. Please reach out to me. Happy to.
Woohoo! Yes, indeed. So, any parting words for the folks still listening, EJ?
Follow your intuition. Those are my parting words. Follow your intuition, your gut feeling. If you have a gut feeling, you're right. Listen to it always.
Thanks a bunch for your listening ears on the Going North podcast. I hope you really, really enjoyed that episode. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to share it with your friends and family, especially those who love podcasts and love listening to some inspiration and motivation.